across the ruins of Stalingrad, carrying with it a cold so sharp it felt like glass cutting through the lungs. Sergeant Anton Mikhailov of the Soviet 62nd Army trudged through waist-deep snow, his breath fogging in the bitter air. The city was nothing but bones, shattered walls, burnt-out tanks, and frozen corpses half buried beneath the snowdrifts. Each step echoed like a whisper of ghosts. Anton was 24 but looked twice that. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. His squad was down to 5 men, boys mostly, from villages long swallowed by the front. They called it the Frozen Front, not because of courage, because even death here froze before it could reach you. Anton stopped near what used to be a train station. He could still see German artillery flashes across the Volga River. The air reeked of oil, gunpowder, and decay. Private Yuri, the youngest, pulled his coat tighter. "Comrade Sergeant," he muttered, teeth chattering, "how much longer can we hold?" Anton didn't answer. He looked at the horizon, the endless white, the smoke rising like the breath of monsters, and said, "Until we stop breathing." They moved on, slipping through the ruins toward a makeshift bunker. A shell landed close by, shaking the ground. Snow rained down from above like ash. Anton clutched the photograph in his pocket, his wife, Elena, and their newborn son. The paper was cracked from cold and handling. He whispered, "You'll see spring again, I promise." But in Stalingrad, spring never came. Inside the bunker, a dim oil lamp flickered against frost-covered walls. The men huddled together, silent except for the soft click of a lighter and the distant thud of artillery. Anton took out a pencil stub and a piece of torn map paper. He began to write. "My dearest Elena, if this reaches you, it means the snow has stopped falling and maybe the world is breathing again. We fight for every brick here. Stalingrad isn't a city anymore. It's a grave that refuses to close." The words trembled in his freezing hands. He could barely feel his fingers. Yuri leaned closer, trying to warm them with his breath. "Writing home, comrade?" Yuri asked. Anton smiled faintly. "It keeps me human." Outside, the sound of footsteps crunched on snow. Enemy patrol. The men froze. Anton blew out the lamp. Darkness swallowed them. Through a small crack in the wall, Anton saw 2 German soldiers, one limping, one coughing. They looked as cold and starved as he did. When the Germans moved on, Yuri whispered, "They're just boys like us." Anton nodded. "That's the cruelest part." He folded the letter, tucked it inside his coat, and said softly, "If I fall, promise you'll send it." Yuri nodded, eyes glistening. "I will, comrade." The bomb started again. Dust rained from the ceiling. The letter stayed close to Anton's heart, the only warm thing left in that frozen hell. By morning, the world had turned gray, smoke and snow blending into one endless void. German tanks roared in the distance. Anton and his men moved through the wreckage, rifles shaking from cold and exhaustion. Each street corner was a tomb, bodies frozen mid-motion, eyes open toward a sky that never answered. They took cover inside a wrecked factory. The walls were riddled with holes. Inside, a lone piano stood, missing keys but somehow untouched. Private Yuri pressed one key. A dull, haunting note echoed. "My mother used to play," he whispered. Anton looked at him, so young, yet already fatting. "After this," Anton said, "you'll hear real music again." A shell hit nearby. The piano shattered. Yuri didn't flinch. Moments later, German infantry advanced through the smoke. Gunfire erupted. The sound was deafening, screams, ricochets, the brutal percussion of survival. Anton fired until his rifle jammed. He grabbed Yuri by the collar, dragging him toward a trench behind the building. Yuri's body went limp. Blood bloomed across the snow like spilled ink. Anton froze. "No, Yuri." But there was no answer, only the howl of the wind. He reached into Yuri's pocket, found the folded letter. His own handwriting stared back at him. He tucked it back into his coat, whispering, Then I'll send it myself. Days passed in fragments, hunger, snow, and silence. Anton barely remembered what warmth felt like. Then one morning he saw it, a German medic crawling through the open, waving a white cloth. The firing had stopped. Both sides were ghosts now. Anton limped forward cautiously. The man wasn't armed. His lips were blue, his hands trembling. Between them lay a wounded child, maybe 10 years old, covered in soot. The medic looked up. "Bit help," he said weakly. Anton hesitated. His rifle hung heavy, but something inside him, something human, still burned beneath the frost. He dropped his gun, lifted the child, and together they carried him to a ruined chapel nearby. The medic tore his sleeve to make a bandage. Anton used his last morphine syringe. No words, just breathing and trembling hands. When the boy's pulse steadied, the medic looked at Anton with tears in his eyes. "Dank." Anton nodded. "No enemies in winter." The medic smiled faintly, and moments later slumped to the ground. Anton sat beside him in the chapel's silence, snow drifting through a hole in the roof. He whispered, "War kills everything except mercy." February 1943, Stalingrad finally fell silent. The battle was over. Anton was among the few survivors. His uniform hung loose on his bones. His eyes carried too many ghosts. When the Red Army reclaimed the city, they found him walking by the river, limping, clutching something in his frostbitten hands, the letter. He was evacuated days later, unconscious. The letter was delivered months afterward to a small apartment in Moscow. Alina opened it with shaking hands. The words blurred through her tears. "If this reaches you, it means the snow has stopped falling, and maybe the world is breathing again." She pressed the paper to her heart. Outside, spring had finally come, the first in 2 years. She didn't know that her husband had survived. Not yet. Miles away, Anton sat in a military hospital, staring at the ceiling, sunlight spilling across his face for the first time in months. A nurse handed him a small silver cross found beside his stretcher, a medic's cross. He smiled faintly. "No enemies in winter," he whispered again. And though his body was broken, the frost inside him began to melt.